Racist police officer attacks black firefighter, not knowing that the chief's house was on fire and depended on him. What happens when a man who is supposed to protect the community becomes its greatest threat? This question echoes through the streets of Lakeview, a town marked by social divisions and racial tensions. Here, Marcus Johnson, a black firefighter admired for his courage, finds himself at the center of a storm that could change his life and the lives of everyone around him. Marcus has always dreamed of being a hero. Since he was young, he has dedicated himself to saving lives and making a difference in the community. Born into a family that faced its own struggles, with a nurse mother and a veteran father, he learned early on about resilience. However, in Lakeview, being a black man brings daily challenges. At the fire station, despite his talent and dedication, he often deals with racist comments from colleagues who cannot see beyond the color of his skin. His wife, Rachel, a lawyer involved in social causes, has always supported him, but the pressure of prejudice and discrimination weighs heavily on Marcus's shoulders. On the other side of town, police officer Ethan Carter represents a different world. Raised in a conservative environment steeped in racial stigmas, he is known for his rigidity and for using excessive force, especially against minorities. During a police encounter, Ethan comes face to face with Marcus and, blinded by his prejudice, assaults him. The incident gains enormous proportions on social media, igniting a flame of outrage in the community. The irony becomes even more evident when, on a fateful day, the house of Police Chief Daniel Matthews catches fire and Marcus is called to the emergency. Matthews's mansion, a symbol of power and privilege, becomes the backdrop for a twist of fate. As the fire consumes the chief's house, Ethan, who was present, finds himself trapped in the flames. Marcus, who has fought to overcome racism and injustice, now faces a choice that could define his character and his life. He must decide whether to risk his own safety to save the life of the man who attacked him. In this crucial moment, the tension between the characters explodes, revealing painful and challenging truths. The fire represents not just physical destruction, but also a necessary transformation. The flames force everyone to confront their realities and reevaluate their beliefs. The Lakeview community watches, eager for answers, as Marcus finds himself torn between saving Ethan or following his instinct to protect himself and others. Marcus's journey is marked by internal doubts and past traumas. He carries the weight of his history and the responsibility of being a role model in a society that often does not accept him. The initial incident of Ethan's attack alters his perspective, challenging what is truly important in his life. Faced with a moral dilemma, Marcus must make a choice that not only affects his future, but also the future of his community. Amid this emotional storm, the story unfolds, revealing the complexities of friendship, prejudice, and overcoming adversity. As the flames die down, the true essence of each character is revealed, and the town of Lakeview finds itself in a moment of reflection and transformation. What seemed like an ordinary day turns into a turning point, and the question that hangs in the air is it possible to find redemption amidst chaos? The thick smoke spread through the air as the fire consumed the walls of the police chief's mansion. Marcus, with his heart racing, knew he had to act quickly. The heat was intense, and the sound of the crackling flames sounded like a desperate scream. He looked at the front door, where Ethan's figure writhed, trapped among the debris. The man who had attacked him was now at the mercy of the fire, and an agonizing choice formed in Marcus's mind. He thought, "I can't let him die," remembering the lessons his mother had taught him about courage and compassion. But at the same time, a feeling of rage boiled within him. The man in front of him was not just a police officer, he was a symbol of everything Marcus had faced in his life. The cruel words Ethan had spoken during that recent confrontation echoed in his mind. He doesn't deserve to be saved, a tempting thought that swayed in his conscience. As he struggled with his emotions, Marcus felt the weight of the community's gaze upon him. People crowded outside, some with their phones in hand, capturing every moment. To many, he was a hero, a man who defied adversity. But now, his choice to save or not save Ethan would be seen as a reflection of the character of the entire black community of Lakeview. The responsibility weighing on his shoulders was almost unbearable. "Marcus, are you okay?" Rachel, his wife, appeared at his side, her face pale with concern. She knew that the situation required more than just a heroic act. "You don't have to do this. He's not worth it." Her words hit him like a blow. She was right, but the idea of letting a man die, regardless of his past actions, tormented him. Rachel's presence brought forth another question. What would this mean for their future? How would she react if he chose not to act? Their relationship, built on love and understanding, could be shaken by this choice. What if Marcus became the man everyone feared? He felt the weight of doubt and anxiety, struggling to find an answer that wouldn't put him at odds with his own values. Meanwhile, in the burning house, Ethan tried to free himself, but the flames surrounded him like a venomous snake. He looked at Marcus, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. There was a silent recognition, an understanding that they were both prisoners of their circumstances and prejudices. Marcus realized that behind the mask of arrogance that Ethan wore, there was a man haunted by his own insecurities. However, the anger Marcus felt was still strong, and he didn't know if he could forgive. On the other side of the city, Marcus's mother, Helena, was watching the news on television, her heart sinking as she saw her son's image featured. She had always taught him to be strong and to fight for justice, but seeing her son in such a situation left her distressed. Why does he have to face this, she thought, feeling powerless. Helena knew that Marcus's life was a constant battle against prejudice, but she also wanted him to find peace and happiness. Tears streamed down her face as she wondered if there was anything she could do to help him. The pressure was mounting, and Marcus's decision was becoming more difficult by the second. He couldn't ignore the struggle his community faced. The story of Lakeview was marked by injustice and pain, and he felt he was on the front lines of that battle. The moral dilemma he faced was not just about saving a life, but about what it meant for the future of the city and for his own identity. With Ethan's screams echoing in his ears, Marcus finally made a decision. He took a deep breath, feeling determination grow within him. "I can't let hate win," he murmured to himself. With a heavy but resolute heart, he moved toward the flames, ready to face his fears and save the man who had once been his enemy. In that moment, Marcus realized that true courage was not just about heroic action, but about the willingness to confront not only the fire consuming the house, but also the flames of prejudice and pain that burned within him. He was about to enter a fight, not only for Ethan's life, but for the very soul of the Lakeview community. Marcus felt the heat of the flames like a burning embrace as he approached the mansion's door. The thick smoke made breathing difficult, and his vision became increasingly blurred. He hesitated for a moment, the weight of his decision almost unbearable. The echo of Rachel's worried and loving gaze still resonated in his mind. He knew many were watching him, waiting for his action. The pressure was mounting, but he couldn't turn back now. As he launched himself into the house, Marcus felt the adrenaline pulse through his veins. The flames danced around him, and the intense heat almost made him recoil. But for Ethan, he forced himself to move forward. There was a part of him that wished the man were trapped there, but another part, the deeper one, knew that letting someone die, even an enemy, was not who he wanted to be. As he advanced, a shelf collapsed beside him, creating a barrier of burning wood. He threw himself aside, dodging the fall, but not without feeling the sting of an ember that scratched his arm. The pain was intense, but it paled in comparison to the pain he would feel if he left Ethan behind. With a cry of determination, he got up, feeling the wound throb, and continued the search. Ethan's screams became more desperate, and Marcus found him in a corner surrounded by debris. The man was trying to get up, but the flames surrounded him. "Help! Help me!" Ethan's voice sounded desperate, and for a moment, Marcus hesitated. Memories of past confrontations and cruel words flashed through his mind. But looking at the man before him, he saw not just an enemy, but a lost soul, much like he had often felt himself. "I'm here!" Marcus shouted, battling against the flames and debris. He got as close as he could, but the heat forced him to pull back for a moment. Frustration and anger mixed in his chest. Ethan didn't deserve his compassion, but Marcus knew that if he didn't save him, he would be losing a part of himself. At that moment, a sudden explosion made the house tremble. The ceiling began to collapse, and Marcus had to act quickly. He lunged at Ethan, pushing him aside as pieces of wood fell around them. The impact was strong, and a sharp pain coursed through his body, but adrenaline kept him moving. He needed to get out of there, and fast. "You need to get up!" Marcus shouted, his voice firm despite the desperation. He forced Ethan to rise, but the man was weak and disoriented. "Come on, I can't do this alone." The urgency in his voice was palpable, and for a moment Ethan looked at Marcus as if he were seeing the man he truly was. Not the adversary, but someone willing to risk his life for him. With a joint effort, they began to move, but the flames continued to advance. The pain in Marcus's arm seemed to increase with every step, but he wouldn't stop. The only thing that mattered now was getting to the exit. The sound of the flames and the heat intensified, and the pressure of time weighed heavily on them. With each second, the house became more unstable. When they finally reached the front door, a new obstacle presented itself. A heavy beam was blocking the exit. Marcus looked at Ethan, who was nearly fainting. "I can't do this alone," he repeated, his voice now weaker. A wave of despair washed over him as he realized that, despite all their efforts, they might not make it out. Ethan, breathing heavily, finally found strength. "Push!" he shouted, and the two united for one final effort. Marcus used all his weight to push the beam, and with a deafening crash, it moved just enough for them to pass. As they stepped into the daylight, the fresh air and freedom hit them like a balm. But the battle was not over yet. The scene outside was chaotic. People were watching, some screaming, others in shock. Rachel was among the crowd, her eyes fixed on Marcus, filled with relief and fear. He saw her, and a mix of love and guilt surged within him. What would this mean for all of them? He had saved the man who had been his enemy, but at what cost? The first thing he did was look at Ethan, who was collapsing, exhausted. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern overriding anger. Ethan looked at him, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They were no longer just adversaries. They were men who had faced death together. As the flames continued to consume the mansion, the struggle within Marcus was far from over. He knew that his choice to save Ethan would change everything. The voices of the community from the past and the future echoed in his mind. What did this mean for him, for Rachel, for Lakeview? He didn't know yet, but one thing was certain: the journey was just beginning. Marcus was breathless. The fresh air outside felt like a distant dream after the scorching heat he had faced inside the burning mansion. He looked at Ethan, who was still leaning against his leg, trying to catch his breath. The man who had once been his enemy now seemed vulnerable, almost human. Ethan's expression was a mix of gratitude and confusion. Marcus realized that at that moment, the line between friend and foe had become blurred. Rachel approached, her eyes shining in the sunlight but filled with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marcus wanted to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He had risked his life to save that man, and now everything felt more complicated. I don't know," he finally said, looking at Ethan. "I don't know if I made the right choice." Doubt gnawed at him. He had saved someone who had caused so much suffering in his life. And now, as he watched the flames consume the mansion, he couldn't shake the feeling that his decision might have consequences he still couldn't comprehend. Ethan, hearing Marcus's words, looked at him with an expression that mixed relief and guilt. "You saved me," he said, his voice low and hesitant. "Why did you do that?" "I don't deserve it." Ethan's words were like knives, reminding Marcus of all the dark past they shared. "Because no one deserves to die like this." Marcus replied, frustration etched on his face. He felt a growing anger, but at the same time an inexplicable compassion. I'm not better than you. I just can't let someone die. Not like this. As the flames continued to burn, a new realization began to take shape in Marcus's mind. He had spent so much time fixated on the idea of revenge, on the need to prove himself superior to Ethan and all the others who had crossed his path. But now, by saving him, something had changed. What did it really mean to win? What did it mean to be strong? He realized that true strength often lies in the ability to forgive and to put oneself in another's shoes. The noise of the crowd around him began to blend with the sound of the flames, and Marcus felt disoriented. He looked at Rachel, who was now closer, her gaze fixed on him. She seemed to be waiting for an answer, an explanation for why he had done what he did. But Marcus didn't have all the answers. He was battling his own shadows, and in that moment, he felt lost. "Marcus, you need to take care of yourself," Rachel said, placing her hand on his arm. He felt the warmth of her presence, the comfort of knowing she was there. But the intensity of the situation made him feel more distant. He turned to look at the mansion, now almost in ruins, and felt a growing weight in his heart. The devastation reminded him of his own internal struggles and the urgent need to confront his fears. "I can't keep going like this, Rachel," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "My life has become a constant battle between what I want and who I am. I don't know who I am anymore." The sincerity of his words seemed to echo in the heavy air around him. Rachel looked at him, her gaze filled with understanding. "You're facing something very big, Marcus, but saving Ethan might be the first step for you to free yourself from this weight. Sometimes we need to confront our own monsters to find peace." Her words penetrated deep into his mind, and a new light began to shine within him. What had become of his choices? He had let himself be carried away by anger and the desire for revenge for so long that he had forgotten who he really was. Perhaps true victory was not about defeating others, but about conquering oneself. "Ethan," he said, turning to the man who was still recovering, "I don't know if I can trust you again, but if you really want to change, I'm willing to try. We can do this together." The idea of a new friendship, even if unexpected, began to flow in his mind, challenging everything he had believed until then. Ethan looked at Marcus with an expression that reflected the same internal struggle. "I don't know if I'm worthy of this, but I want to change." Udale, as the two men stared at each other, a new hope began to rise. Marcus realized that by saving Ethan, he had found a part of himself that he thought he had lost. And despite the confusion and fear still surrounding him, he knew he was ready to face whatever came next. Their journey together was just beginning, and perhaps this was the true chance for redemption that they both needed. Marcus felt as if he were in a whirlwind. The smoke from the burning mansion still lingered in the air, and the sound of distant sirens reminded him of the gravity of the situation. Beside him, Rachel tried to calm him down, but he could barely process what had just happened. He had saved Ethan, a man who had been his enemy, and now he found himself facing a new and unexpected challenge, the possibility of rebuilding a relationship that had once been marked by hostility. As the crowd dispersed, a few people looked curiously at the two men. Marcus felt the weight of their gazes, as if they were trying to understand this new dynamic. It was as if the decision he had made affected not only Ethan's life, but also his own. He didn't want to be seen as a hero. In fact, he was afraid of what this choice could mean for him in the future. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked again. She seemed genuinely concerned, and that made Marcus feel even more confused. He wanted to thank her for being by his side, but he felt he didn't have enough words. Instead, he just nodded, even though his heart still felt heavy. "You need to talk to someone about this, Marcus," Rachel suggested, her voice soft as always. "What happened was very intense, and you can't carry all of this alone." But he couldn't imagine how he could explain the turmoil that was going on in his mind. What did he really feel? Doubt and uncertainty consumed him. As they walked toward the parking lot, Marcus glanced at Ethan, who was now calmer but wore an expression of someone still fighting against his own demons. There was an awkward silence between them, a tension that felt almost palpable. Marcus wondered if Ethan was feeling lost too, or if he was just trying to understand what it meant to be saved by someone who had once been his adversary. "I don't know how to start redeeming myself," Ethan finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, but there was a sincerity that touched Marcus. "I've done so many wrong things. I don't know if I can fix all of this." Marcus realized that the man before him was also carrying a weight, and that made him feel a bit of empathy. After all, they had been on opposite sides of a battle that seemed endless. "Maybe it's not about fixing everything all at once," Marcus replied hesitantly. "Maybe it's more about taking small steps. I don't know how to do that, but I'm willing to try." He surprised himself with his own words. It was as if, by offering them, he was also taking a step toward his own healing. The walk to the car felt long, and Marcus felt the tension rising in his body. What followed would be a new journey, and he didn't know if he was ready. He looked at Rachel, who was driving the car, and felt that she was his safe harbor. Her words still echoed in his mind, and he knew he needed support as he faced the consequences of his decision. In the following days, Marcus found himself struggling to understand the impact of his choice. He began having nightmares, reliving the scene of the fire and the feeling that the past was still haunting him. With each dawn, he woke up with the doubt of whether he had done the right thing. Moments of introspection became more frequent, and he started to question who he really was. The internal struggle between his desire for revenge and the need for forgiveness felt more intense than ever. Rachel was always by his side, offering support and listening to his distress. "You don't need to rush, Marcus. This change takes time," she would say, trying to calm him. But he felt that time was passing and that he needed to act. The idea of facing Ethan again made him anxious, but at the same time, he knew he couldn't avoid the confrontation for much longer. One day, while walking through the park, Marcus spotted Ethan sitting on a bench. The man seemed lost in thought, and the sight of him made Marcus hesitate. He was so close to a new beginning, but fear paralyzed him. What if Ethan wasn't sincere? What if he was just playing a game, waiting for the opportunity to attack him again? But as he looked at the man he had saved, Marcus realized he couldn't keep living with that fear. He approached, his heart racing. "Ethan," he called, his voice firmer than he felt. "Can we talk?" Ethan looked up, surprised, and a small spark of hope shone on his face. "Sure, I want to understand. I want to make this right." And as the words were exchanged, something began to change between them. It wouldn't be easy, but both were willing to face their demons and perhaps find a path to redemption together. The journey was just beginning, but for the first time, Marcus felt that there might be a light at the end of the tunnel. Marcus was sitting on a park bench, trying to organize his thoughts. The conversation with Ethan still reverberated in his mind, and he wondered if he was really ready to face what was to come. The fresh morning air brought a touch of clarity, but uncertainty still weighed on his heart. He knew he needed to overcome his fear and doubts, not just regarding Ethan, but also about himself. In the days that followed, Marcus decided he couldn't let insecurity paralyze him. He began to take small steps. First, he committed to attending therapy sessions, something he had always hesitated to do. By sharing his feelings with a professional, he started to understand the complexity of the emotions that overwhelmed him. He realized that the fear he felt wasn't just about Ethan, but also about the possibility of failing. The idea of not being able to cope with what had happened deeply troubled him. Rachel continued to be his unwavering support, always by his side, offering words of encouragement. "You are stronger than you realize, Marcus," she said, and those words began to resonate within him. He started to believe that perhaps he was capable of facing his challenges. Over time, the therapy sessions became a safe space where he could explore his insecurities. He learned to trust himself more and to accept that he didn't have to face everything alone. One morning, while walking in the park, Marcus came across a group of people practicing yoga. He had always found the idea of yoga strange, but something compelled him to join them. As he positioned himself on the mat, he felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. During the practice, he realized that it wasn't just about stretching the body, but also about calming the mind and finding a space of inner peace. The deep breaths helped him release some of the weight he carried, and he began to understand that overcoming challenges was a journey that required both physical and emotional effort. After a few weeks, Marcus felt more confident. He decided it was time to meet Ethan again. His heart raced, but he was determined to face his fears. When he arrived at the agreed location, he saw Ethan already waiting for him. The man seemed nervous, but there was something different in his posture. Marcus sat down and, before he could overthink things, began to speak. "I have been reflecting a lot on what happened between us," Marcus started, his voice firmer than he expected. "I don't want to live with fear or resentment. I wanted to tell you that I am willing to try to understand what happened and how we can move forward." Ethan looked into Marcus's eyes, and the sincerity in his gaze relieved Marcus. "I have been working on my own transformation," Ethan replied, "and I want you to know that I don't want to be the person I was anymore. What happened at the mansion made me realize that life is much more precious than I had imagined." Ethan's words sounded true, and Marcus felt that perhaps there was hope for both of them. They began to share their stories, their struggles, and their fears. Over time, the conversation evolved into an open dialogue where both could be vulnerable. As a result, their friendship began to evolve in unexpected ways. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus realized that true wealth lay in the connections he formed, not in material possessions. He began to understand that success was measured not only in external achievements, but also in the internal changes he experienced. This new perspective brought a sense of peace he had never known before. Through the friendship that was forming with Ethan, Marcus learned valuable lessons about forgiveness, empathy, and the importance of being open to new possibilities. He realized that by accepting help from others, he was allowing himself to grow and transform. The journey for both would not be easy, but the willingness to walk together, face challenges, and learn from adversity brought new meaning to their lives. Marcus, now stronger and more confident, began to apply the lessons he had learned. He became an advocate for change, not only for himself, but also for those around him. The pain and struggle he had faced became part of his story, but they did not define who he was. On the contrary, they shaped him into someone willing to grow and transform, one day at a time. And so, he found not only a new friendship, but also a new purpose. Marcus sat at a small cafe table, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air around him. His heart raced, and the anticipation of a new meeting with Ethan made him nervous. They had met several times since their last conversation, but that day, something felt different. There was a palpable tension in the air, as if they both knew they were about to face a decisive challenge. Ethan arrived, his face reflecting anxiety and determination. He took a deep breath before sitting down, and Marcus could see that his friend was also dealing with his own insecurities. "We need to talk about what happened at the mansion," Ethan began, his voice trembling. "I can't stop thinking about it and how it affected us." Marcus nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. What happened that night still haunted him. He remembered the confusion, the pain, and how everything seemed to crumble so quickly. "I feel the same way," Marcus replied, searching for the right words. "It was a difficult experience, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I was so lost and filled with fear." The conversation flowed between them, but as they spoke, Marcus realized that the wound was still open. Ethan revealed that he had felt guilty about what happened, while Marcus struggled to understand his own role in the situation. The atmosphere heated up as they began to blame each other, the conversation turning into a fervent exchange of emotions. "I don't want to live like this anymore," Ethan said, his voice raised. "I'm tired of carrying this weight." Ethan's words resonated with Marcus, and he remembered everything he had been through. He had committed to overcoming his fears and insecurities, but now, seeing Ethan's pain, he felt torn. The need to protect his own heart led him to pull back, but the desire to help his friend pushed him to move forward. "Ethan, I know we all have flaws, but we need to learn from this, not let it define us." Marcus felt the tension in the room grow. The emotions were raw, and he knew this was a crucial moment. He needed to be honest, not only with Ethan but also with himself. "I was wrong too," he admitted. "I let fear take over and couldn't see the truth, but now I'm here, willing to try again." Ethan looked at him, his eyes reflecting a mix of pain and hope. "Do you really believe we can get past this?" The question hung in the air, filled with expectation. Marcus took a deep breath, remembering the lessons he had learned over the past few weeks. He had discovered that true strength came from vulnerability and the willingness to open up to others. "Yes, I believe," Marcus replied firmly. "We can build something better from this. The friendship we have is worth fighting for." The answer felt liberating, as if a weight had been lifted. They both felt a wave of relief as the tension began to dissipate. They started discussing how they could move forward, setting boundaries and expectations, but also allowing themselves to be human. The conversation turned into a sincere exchange of feelings, and gradually, the atmosphere became lighter. Laughing and sharing stories, their friendship solidified, revealing the strength they had found in each other. When the conversation came to an end, Marcus felt that he had overcome a significant challenge. The friendship that was forming was not just a remedy for their wounds, but also an opportunity for growth. He had learned the importance of opening up, facing his fears, and accepting flaws as part of life. With that, Marcus realized that true wealth was not in material possessions, but in the connections that were formed and the lessons learned along the way. As they said goodbye, Marcus felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked into Ethan's eyes and smiled, knowing that together they could face any challenge that might arise. Their journey would not be easy, but they were ready to walk side by side, learning and growing with each step. And so, Marcus not only found a new purpose, but also an unshakable friendship that would accompany him for a lifetime. After that pivotal meeting, Marcus's life began to change in subtle yet significant ways. He realized that his conversations with Ethan not only eased the weight he carried, but also opened new perspectives on himself and the value of human relationships. In the days that followed, the two friends met more frequently, not just to discuss their insecurities, but also to share moments of joy and relaxation. With each meeting, Marcus felt lighter. He discovered that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness, but rather a door to a deeper bond. Conversations about their experiences in the mansion became less distressing and more a form of learning. They laughed at situations that had once felt so heavy, and this brought them even closer. Marcus realized that by facing his fears, he was also helping Ethan deal with his. One day, while walking in the park, Ethan remarked, "You know, I never would have imagined that night in the mansion could lead us to such a good place." Marcus smiled, recalling the pain he had felt. "It's funny how life works. Sometimes we need to go through hardships to really appreciate what we have. I not only learned to cope with my fears, but also to value our friendship." This feeling of gratitude extended to other areas of Marcus's life. He began to open up more to his family, sharing his struggles and victories. Communication became more fluid, and he felt that the love in his home grew as he allowed himself to be more authentic. The fear of judgment gradually disappeared, making way for an environment of support and understanding. Additionally, Marcus started to engage in activities he had previously avoided. He enrolled in an art class, something he had always wanted to do, but never had the courage for. As he explored his creativity, he discovered a new passion that helped him express his feelings more clearly. On one of the class days, he painted a canvas that depicted not only his insecurities, but also the strength he found in his friendship with Ethan. When he showed the painting to his friend, they both felt a wave of emotion. "This is beautiful, Marcus. You captured everything we've been through," Ethan said with tears in his eyes. The repercussions of the honesty they shared in that cafe were visible in their lives, but they also impacted those around them. Mutual friends began to notice the change in the dynamic between the two. The energy emanating from their friendship was contagious. Others felt inspired to open their own hearts and connect more deeply. A group of friends began to gather regularly, creating a safe space for everyone to share their experiences and challenges. In one of those meetings, a close friend said, "You guys have changed the way we all see friendship. It's amazing to see how you opened up to each other and grew together." Marcus and Ethan exchanged a knowing glance, aware that their journey was just beginning. Over time, Marcus became an advocate for the importance of vulnerability in relationships. He started sharing his story in small groups, helping others understand that they are not alone in their struggles. The repercussions of his decision to face his fears spread, leaving a legacy of courage and authenticity. As they walked together on a sunny afternoon, Marcus looked at Ethan and said, "I think I've finally understood what it means to be truly free." Ethan smiled, satisfied. "And this is just the beginning. We're in this together, always." The journey that began in a cafe transformed into a continuous walk filled with lessons, challenges, and above all, an unshakable friendship. Marcus realized that the wounds of the past did not completely disappear, but now, instead of weighing down on him, they served as reminders of how far he had come. With Ethan by his side, he felt they could face any storm that life put in their way. And so, life went on, filled with new opportunities, courage, and the certainty that true strength lies in the connections we cultivate. Marcus looked at the horizon as he walked alongside Ethan, reflecting on the transformation his life had undergone since that pivotal encounter. He remembered how insecurity and fear paralyzed him, but now, next to his friend, he felt strong and confident. Their friendship not only brought forth his vulnerabilities, but also became a source of strength. The conversations that were once painful were now redemptive. Marcus realized that by sharing his experiences, he was also helping others around him. The change in the dynamic among his friends was palpable, and the group kept growing. Everyone felt encouraged to open their hearts and support one another. The pain of the past, which once seemed an unbearable burden, was now transforming into valuable lessons that served as fuel for personal growth. The art course proved to be a true epiphany for Marcus. Each brushstroke on the canvas was an expression of his emotions, and when he showed his work to Ethan, he felt he was sharing not just a painting, but a part of himself. The joy he felt, seeing his friend's reaction, made him realize that true success was not about being perfect, but about being authentic and true to oneself and others. Over time, Marcus became an advocate for vulnerability. He began speaking in small groups about his journey of overcoming challenges, encouraging others to do the same. It was gratifying to see faces light up as they realized they were not alone in their struggles. He learned that true strength lies in human connection and the willingness to be open and honest. However, not everything was smooth sailing. In a moment of weakness, Marcus found himself once again facing a situation that challenged him. An old colleague who had always belittled him made a spiteful comment during one of the group meetings. Instead of allowing himself to be crushed, Marcus took a deep breath and faced the situation firmly. He decided it was time to take revenge, but not in a negative way. His revenge would be to prove to himself that he had changed and that he would no longer let others' words affect him. That night, Marcus picked up his paints and began working on a new piece. It was a portrait of his journey, with vibrant colors representing the victories and shadows for the struggles he faced. When he finished, he decided it was time to share it with everyone, including his old colleague. During a meeting, he presented his new painting and spoke about how he overcame his fears. He looked directly at the person who belittled him and said, "Someone's words only have power if you let them. I chose not to let that happen anymore." The room fell silent, but soon applause began to erupt and everyone applauded Marcus. He not only took revenge on negativity, but also stood as an example of overcoming and courage. This experience further solidified his belief that true strength comes from within, and that friendship, like the one he had with Ethan, was one of the greatest gifts life could offer. As they walked together again, Marcus said, "Look how everything has changed. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. What matters is who we are now." Ethan nodded, smiling. They knew that the journey of overcoming and self-discovery was just beginning. This story shows that everyone has the power to change their lives and impact others. If you have an experience you'd like to share, or if you've faced similar challenges, leave your comment below. Let's create a space of support and inspiration, because each of us can be the change we wish to see. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can spread more messages of courage and authenticity. It's time to take action now.